The first time I saw them, the heat was rising off the dirt road like breath from some tired old spirit. Noon light spilled across the town, so bright it made the storefront windows glare like judgmental eyes. I remember the creak of my saddle, the dust clinging to my coat, and the kind of quiet inside my chest that only a man who's lived alone too long can understand. I wasn't riding and looking for trouble or salvation or anything worth remembering. But life has a way of stirring itself awake when you think you've grown too old for surprises. And that day, the wind carried more than dust. It carried a plea that would change the shape of my days. Near the sheriff's steps, a small crowd had gathered, buzzing with that particular curiosity townsfolk get when they smell vulnerability. And standing at the center of it all was a woman, a young woman, though life had carved more years into her posture than her face admitted. She held a baby tight to her chest, its tiny cries swallowed by the hot air. Beside her stood a girl who couldn't have been more than 8, small but brave, chin set like she had decided the world had tested her enough for one lifetime. The sheriff stood above them, boots planted wide, his voice carrying just enough for the crowd to hear. The words didn't matter. I'd heard variations my whole life, words people use when they want someone gone without saying it outright. Those whispers floating from the crowd told the story fast. Widowed, no money, husband's brothers looking for her. Sheriff Wade says she's a burden. And through all of it, the woman, Mara, though I didn't know her name yet, stood perfectly still. Her eyes were hollow, as though she'd packed away her own emotions in some hidden place where no one could take them. But shame has its own ways of showing itself, even in the proudest souls. It hung around her like dust caught in sunlight. I dismounted without thinking much about why, just felt a pull on my chest, the quiet recognition of someone who has stood alone before a crowd. I didn't get closer, not yet. Didn't speak. I just watched. Then the girl stepped forward. She didn't look at the sheriff. She didn't look at the crowd. She looked straight at me, as if she had somehow sensed that out of all the boots planted in that dusty street, mine were the only ones unsure enough to be gentle. She shifted the baby in her arms, swallowing hard. Her voice trembled like a string pulled too tight. "Mister, can you buy us?" It hit me like a gunshot without sound. All the whispers stopped. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. The girl's eyes were big, frightened, but determined. A child tried to bargain for safety with whatever words she thought grown-ups listened to. Her mother gasped, stepping toward her, reaching out with a shaking hand as if she could reclaim those words before they caused more damage. But the girl continued, voice softer now, nearly breaking. "Or rent us. Or just take us so the sheriff won't take Mama away." Mara's knees buckled, her breath hitching into a soft cry she tried to swallow. She pulled the girl back, whispering Lottie, no, over and over again. But the words had already hung themselves in the air like a prayer no heaven had answered yet. Sheriff Wade smirked, always ready to twist desperation into entertainment. The crowd murmured with that cruel curiosity people get when something breaks in front of them. And me, I froze, because somewhere deep inside, that little girl's voice found the quietest memory I tried to bury. The night my own mother had begged someone, anyone, to take us in, and the town had turned away with the same expression these folks wore now. I didn't want to speak. I didn't want to step into anyone's life. But sometimes the world gives you a moment that feels like a fork in your soul. And you know if you walk away, you'll lose something you can never name. I stepped forward. "I'll take responsibility for them," I said, the words rough and used. Just for now. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a promise. It was the smallest act of grace a man like me could offer. Sheriff Wade frowned, annoyed that his spectacle had lost steam. But he shrugged, muttering something about paperwork and county burdens. And just like that, the woman, the girl, and the baby were handed to me. Not like people, but like something being exchanged just to keep order tidy. Mara couldn't meet my eyes. Her face was burning with humiliation. I could feel her shame like heat. Lottie clung to her baby brother, watching the crowd with suspicion far too old for a child. As we walked through the town, it felt like moving through a tunnel of stairs. Every boot step seemed louder. The air felt thicker. Mara kept whispering, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, as though she had cursed my life by crossing it. You've nothing to be sorry for, I murmured, but she didn't seem to hear. We reached Hazel Morrow's boarding house, an old wooden place that smelled of laundry soap and warm bread. Hazel had been a widow for longer than I'd been alive, tough as old rope but soft where it counted. She took one look at the family behind me and clicked her tongue. They'll stay, she said firmly, ignoring the town gossip waiting behind her porch rail. Inside, the air felt gentler. Mara stood in the corner like someone afraid to touch anything that wasn't hers. Lottie set the baby on a small cot, shushing him with the quiet devotion of someone who had raised him more than her years should allow. Hazel handed Mara water. Mara held it like a fragile gift. I'll fix the door latch, I muttered, even though Hazel hadn't said it was broken. Mara watched me from the doorway, her eyes soft, almost confused by the help. I felt her gaze like warmth on my back, and for a moment, the world slowed, the kind of slowing that happens when two souls quietly acknowledge each other without speaking. I left food for them without announcing it, just set it on the table. Lottie whispered, "Thank you," in the shy way children thank strangers who haven't yet hurt them. Mara tried to refuse, but exhaustion won the argument. Later, I overheard her speaking with Hazel. Mara's voice was low, like someone terrified of being heard. "My husband died in the mines," she whispered. "His brothers said I owed them, said the baby was theirs to decide about. I ran before they could take him." The words tightened something in my chest. I didn't go inside. I didn't say anything, but I stood outside the door until the candlelight dimmed, guarding without meaning to. When the sun dipped low and the sky turned the color of bruised peach, the wind shifted. Cold, sharp, the kind of wind that announces trouble long before you see it. By morning, word had spread. The brothers were coming. Sheriff Wade said he'd hand Mara over if proper claims were presented. I stood in the street, the wind tugging at my coat, the dust lifting like spirits around my boots. I looked up at the window where Mara and her children slept. I realized then, I wasn't just helping strangers anymore. I was guarding something tender, something the world had already tried too hard to break. And trouble, when it comes, has a way of testing whether a man steps forward, or lets fear make his choices for him. The morning came cold, the kind of chill that makes your bones remember every long winter you've ever known. I could see the dust curling off the road like smoke from a fire not yet extinguished, and somewhere beyond it, the men we feared were riding in. Mara stirred in the room behind me, the baby squirming in her arms, Lottie holding him like he was the most precious thing in the world, because he was. I didn't speak at first. I just stepped outside, boots crunching against the frost-dusted dirt, and watched the brothers appear over the rise. Their horses' hooves hit the ground like warning drums, and even from this distance, I could see the arrogance in the way they carried themselves, the assumption that a woman alone could be taken, that fear could be traded like cattle. Mara pressed herself against the wall behind the door, and I saw the subtle tremor in her fingers as she held the baby close. She wasn't hiding for herself anymore. She was hiding to protect them, and it made something in me tighten with an urgency I hadn't felt in years. The first of the brothers, a tall man with shoulders like stacked logs, spat into the dirt and called out, "Mara Ellison, we've come for what's ours. The sheriff says you belong to us." His voice carried enough malice to make the wind shiver. I didn't answer immediately. I just stood quiet, my hat in my hands. Silence, sometimes, carries more weight than bullets. They looked at me and laughed, thinking I'd step aside, thinking I'd let fear dictate the moment. I didn't. I said nothing at first. I just shifted my weight, the dust rising around my boots, and stared them down. A slow, steady kind of stare, the kind that grows out of loneliness and loss, out of having watched helplessness before and vowing never to watch it again. Mara peeked around the doorway, eyes wide, heart hammering against the rib cage that had been carrying fear for too long. I took a small step forward. "You'll find she belongs to no one," I said finally. My voice was calm, carrying the weight of conviction that comes from years of solitary reckoning. "And the children belong with their mother." The men laughed, but the sound lacked certainty now. The townsfolk were gathering, slow and hesitant at first, leaning out of windows, peering over fences. Their whispers were like a tide building behind me. Curiosity, judgment, anticipation. Sheriff Wade tried to step forward, clearing his throat, voice shaking with authority he clearly didn't fully own. "Calder Boone," he said, "you can't just—" "I can," I interrupted softly, letting the quiet edge of steel cut through the words before he could finish. "If you can claim cattle for survival, I can claim responsibility for a family for decency. That's the law that matters here today." Mara stepped forward then. Not fully, not boldly, but enough that I could see her resolve. She was shaking, yes, but her voice carried over the dirt and the clamor. "I choose my children, and I choose to stay where we're not treated like traded goods." Her words hung in the air, fragile yet unbreakable. The brothers moved toward her, fists raised, but the town was watching now, and hesitation crept into their swagger. Hazel appeared in the doorway, shotgun in hand, not fired, but held with authority, a quiet roar behind the barrel. Slowly, one by one, townsfolk began to step forward. Bern Madsen, Mrs. Cleary, even the butcher's boy Eli, all silent witnesses, suddenly realizing they had a chance to do the right thing, and they took it. The brothers froze. The sheriff's smirk faltered, and the wind carried our silence like a banner across the street. Then, as though the world itself had decided that fear and cruelty were no longer welcome, the brothers backed down. Their horses snorted, and they retreated slowly, shoulders tense, dignity shattered, leaving us standing in a street littered with dust and whispers. I exhaled, finally, and Mara's knees buckled, but I caught her. She let herself fold into me, relief spilling out in a quiet, shuddering breath. Lottie ran to my side, hugging my legs like she had found a guardian in the only way a child could know. The baby gurgled in Mara's arms, oblivious to the danger that had just passed. Hazel clucked softly, putting her hand on my shoulder. "You did what had to be done," she said. "And they saw it too. Maybe they'll think twice before hurting anyone else." Mara looked up at me, eyes soft, finally unguarded. No words were necessary. Her gratitude, exhaustion, and relief were enough to fill the space between us. Slowly, as if testing the waters of this new normal, she offered a cup of coffee one morning. Not as payment, but as thanks, and the gesture was more intimate than any declaration of love. The days passed quietly after that. I helped fix the window frame, taught Lottie how to hold the reins, made the baby laugh in ways that made Mara smile, watching her shoulders relax as the shadows of constant fear lifted bit by bit. Small acts of grace built a rhythm between us, a slow-burning trust neither of us dared to name aloud. And yet, in those quiet moments, the most important things happened. Mara began to stand taller. Lottie's laughter came without hesitation. Baby James slept more peacefully, and Hazel's boarding house felt warmer, safer, more like home. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky with bruised purples and golds, I found myself leaning against the porch post, watching Mara tuck the baby into Lottie's arms. The three of them were still, fragile, yet unbroken. And I realized, sometimes families aren't born from blood, but from a moment when someone decides they will not turn away from another's need. I took a deep breath, dust swirling at my boots, and spoke softly, as if to the wind itself. If you ever find someone standing alone in their own kind of dust storm, remember, one small act of grace can rewrite a life. Maybe even your own. Mara looked at me then, eyes reflecting the last colors of the day. No words passed between us, because they didn't need to. Everything had been said in the quiet. The shared glances, the gentle gestures, the protection and courage found in simple choices. I mounted my horse at dawn the next day, as I always do, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of solitude pressing against me. Because somewhere behind me, Mara and her children had found the courage to stay, and I'd found a kind of purpose that doesn't need applause to feel complete. And so the town whispered yes. The sheriff frowned. The gossipers still stared. But inside the small boarding house, behind patched windows and creaking floorboards, life had been rewritten quietly, with resilience, dignity, and an unlikely kind of love. And as the wind carried the dust across the hills, I felt a strange warmth settle in my chest. A reminder that even in a world built of hardship, there are moments when courage meets kindness. And in those moments, everything changes.